Welcome back. You know, nothing bugs a man, or a woman for that matter, probably more so women, than alopecia, the loss of hair on the scalp. It happens to many of us as we age, and some of us, before we even start aging, it seems to just get thinner and thinner, and there's certain patterns to balding. We're going to talk today with Danny Roddy, take a completely different look at this. You may have to turn that radio down. I don't. Are you? Is there some feedback coming to you, Danny?
No, but my headphones might be a little too loud. I just turned them down.
Okay. This is a different approach. There's lots of stuff out there in the mainstream that talks about hair loss and what can be done about it and so on. But so let's talk about your journey and why this became an interest of yours, and also some of the early epiphanies. What made you even think about this?
Oddly enough, like I never had any interest in getting into health or writing about physiology. A couple of years ago, I think 2005, 2006, I was in a band and we got signed to a major label, Island Def Jam, and we were being told by the label that we were like the next act, and you guys better pretty much get ready to be on tour for the rest of your life. So this just scared the hell out of me, and this coupled, we went to Europe, and I just kind of started falling apart. I was losing just tons of hair, and my hair was really my identity, and the idea of not having it in a future where I was potentially going to be famous in some way just scared the hell out of me.
So it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, the fear, the angst, the stress, and I've seen this happen before. I have a good friend when I was in my 20s, and he was in his 20s, who went through a very, very stressful period of his life, and he started losing hair in clumps, in fact. I remember he had to get injections that actually helped resolve it. So, the other thing that's always interested me, while I rail against the idea that chemotherapy is a good choice to treat cancer, because, as I said on the show before, chemotherapy treating cancer is like burning down the whole house in order to get rid of a stain on the carpet. But one of the things that's interesting about chemotherapy is these individuals, because of the high toxic load, lose all their hair, but it does grow back. And you have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. What's the difference between a follicle that goes to sleep and comes back to life or wakes up again, and what's going on in things like receding hairlines and various patterns of baldness? So tell me your story now. So did you then immerse yourself in the science of going like, wow, I've got to figure out what's going on with my hair. I'm in big trouble.
Yeah, pretty much. My first action was going to my dermatologist, getting my hormones measured, and him telling me I should go on Propecia. So I did that. Didn't really work out, and I had pretty bad sexual or impotent symptoms almost a couple months after taking the drug.
Okay, we have to address this. Stay with that for a second. So I had a guy email me the other day saying that he's getting HRT, and his doctor not only prescribed testosterone but finasteride and an aromatase inhibitor. And I said, run for your life. Never take finasteride. In fact, finasteride has an amazingly long half-life in the body, and it immediately causes erectile dysfunction. It can cause anxiety. It can cause all sorts of nasty side effects in an effort to try to reduce 5-alpha reductase activity and reduce the production of DHT. DHT is a very, very important neurosteroid.
Totally. And some guys may be like, well, you know what, I'll take the chance of symptoms if this drug makes my hair grow back. But I think the Merck overstates the efficacy of the drug, because in the studies I've seen, it's about 40% efficacious. And there was a article by a gentleman, like a lawyer named Jonathan J. Darrow, that just really puts things into perspective, and he suggests the drug is about 10% effective. And so when you kind of weigh the danger and then the ineffectiveness of this drug, like obviously if this drug is effective, I wouldn't walk down the streets of San Francisco and all these guys like choosing to be bald. And it really makes me think of why people continue down this paradigm what I call the genetic androgen hypothesis.
Well, and let's also say that surely Merck couldn't be lying about a drug. Oh, wait a minute. They gave us Vioxx. They only killed 55,000 people in the United States, and no one ever went to jail. So, no, let's trust Merck unabashedly. My God, Merck. I want the military to go into White House Station, New Jersey, and invade Merck, quite frankly, because they've killed more Americans than any terrorists have. So, but anyway, that's another show. That's another show.
Yeah.
All right. So So how did this resolve? Did you have to drop out of the band? What did you do?
I just became totally obsessed with it. Luckily, I stumbled upon a gentleman's website really early on. His name was Brian Simonis, and he was kind of my first glimpse that there was a different theory out there of male pattern baldness, so-called. So he was saying it's not as easy as testosterone, 5-alpha reductase, dihydrotestosterone, androgen receptor, or whatever. He was saying all these different hormones are involved, like prolactin, cortisol, aldosterone, and he kind of shaped a kind of blurry picture of what was going on, but I really sunk my teeth into it and made notes, and he had a really exhaustive supplement regimen that I adopted literally overnight, and I was trying to make it work over a period of time and had an epiphany eventually. If I'm just taking all these supplements to try to mimic this positive hormonal cascade to keep my hair, why couldn't I just do that with diet? So that started this kind of long laundry list of trying different diets to see how they would affect my hair. And I went through veganism, vegetarianism, paleo dieting, zero carb dieting over a span of 6 or 7 years. And I learned just an incredible amount about myself, but also about different views of how the body works and stress and aging and things like that. So I just had amassed so much information and different points of views that I started writing about it, and somehow that resonated with people, and they kind of gravitated to me.
Okay, we're going to go into a break, but real briefly, the Reader's Digest version of the androgen theory of hair loss is this: every single follicle seems to have two DHT receptors on them, and as a result, it is thought that by DHT docking in these receptors puts the follicle to sleep, folks. Doesn't kill the follicle. It puts the follicle to sleep. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Just a little bit later in the show, we're going to tell you how you can get a free ebook if you are concerned or someone you know is concerned about hair loss from Danny Roddy. Stay tuned. We're going to take one quick commercial break. You're listening to Superhuman Radio. We shall return.
Here's the thing, we started out friends. It was cool, but it was all pretend. Yeah, since you've been gone.
This is the song that some of you are singing to your hair right now. Since you've been gone. I miss you, I want you back. I'm the right one for you. All those lyrics fit this discussion. So the name of the band was Dakota, for those of you who are wondering. And you did go on a tour for quite a while. I think it's ironic that you replaced the band as the during the, is it pronounced Atreyu's World Championship Tour?
Atreyu, yeah.
You replaced the band from first to last, which obviously lived up to their name because they moved out.
Funny thing about that, the singer is that DJ Skrillex. So before he was the biggest band in the world, he was in a Screamo band.
How do you like that? That's amazing. Amazing. All right. So the DHT theory obviously has some flaws in it, because clearly there are lots of people out there who lose their hair and it's not from dihydrotestosterone. So when you started digging around, you obviously realized that there was some, flaws in that. What did you start to discover?
I think to kind of understand, the obsession with androgens and baldness is just is across the board. You cannot read a paper about male pattern baldness, so-called, or androgenic alopecia without it starting by referencing the 1942 paper by a guy named Dr. James B. Hamilton. And this guy was so significant to research because he found that castrates or males who failed to mature sexually had complete retention of head hair. They had less sebaceous gland activity, and they had less or no dandruff. And so he concluded in the 40s that testosterone was the prime suspect for balding, and that because these castrates or men who had damaged testicles didn't produce any testosterone, therefore they didn't lose their hair. And it was just like kind of a simplistic theory. But if you read through his research, he was open to all different kinds of like different things. He wasn't stating it with great authority or anything like that. And the next great leap, so-called, in pattern baldness research was in 1974 when Dr. Umberto McGinley, a researcher from Cornell, visited a group of pseudo-hermaphrodites in the Dominican Republic, and she found that they had normal levels of testosterone, but they were deficient in an enzyme that converted testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. So they had normal levels of testosterone. They were also free from acne, just like the castrates and eunuchs. And so she was like, oh, it's not testosterone, it's DHT. So these two things, in the very next sequence of events, is actually Merck getting wind of Dr. Imperial McGinley's findings and creating a drug for benign prostate hyperplasia. So it's kind of like the perfect, just Hamilton's and Imperial McGinley's findings wouldn't be that big of a deal, and science would have kind of played itself out in its great, amazing virtue, but the pharmaceutical industry stepped in and created kind of a doctrine of how pattern baldness works, and Propecia is semi-effective, so that kind of reinforced the idea that androgens were responsible. However, when you go back to the original findings of Dr. Hamilton and you look at the hormonal situation of his castrates, who were 100% immune to baldness all the time, no matter if they had inherited a family history of baldness, they had lots of other things going on too. For instance, they didn't produce a significant quantity of estrogen, or they also didn't produce a significant quantity of prolactin. And these two hormones are almost virtually ignored in pattern baldness research because it's so androgen focused.
Is it the estradiol? Is it the estrone? Is it the estriol? That when we look at the estrogen component of the potential estrogen component of this?
I think it can be really confusing just looking at hormones and trying to figure out what they do. So under the umbrella of energy metabolism, or how the cells produce energy, is kind of the way that I found is kind of easiest to understand what they do. And while people are saying, oh, this estrogen is less bad than this one, they all seem to inhibit energy metabolism in some fashion. And if you look at the human as running on efficient energy, and it kind of being the glue holding the organism together, and balding as a inefficient energetic state, and I have yet to convince you of this yet, but I think it can be argued that you'd want to tightly regulate estrogen, whether it be estrone or estradiol or whatever.
Okay, there's also some research out there, and you and I talked about this off the air, that whether it's causative or corollary, that implicates 2/3 of individuals that suffer from pattern baldness, regardless of whether they respond to androgen therapy or whatever, androgen blockade therapy or whatever, seem to have very, very poor blood flow to the scalp, which, that's kind of an interesting one to me because of the whole, the blood flow irrigates and feeds the follicle. And if you turn the irrigation system off, everything in that field is going to die slowly or go to sleep and become dormant. And again, we're talking about follicles that become dormant, folks. If what Andy Roddy is talking about here, it works for you, you can regrow hair. We know that people can regrow hair. But waking the follicle up, getting it out of the dormant phase and getting it back into the growing phase is where the magic is. So what do you think about the whole blood flow, poor blood flow to the scalp component of this?
Yeah, I think that's definitely supported by the evidence. One of my kind of favorite theories about baldness was a guy named Dr. Hosel, I'm probably saying his name wrong, but back in the 1940s, right when Hamilton was figuring out how he thought baldness worked, Hosel was doing cadaver research and taking off the lids of people with hair loss, and he looked at the cranium underside, and he noticed that all the people with baldness had slick, quote, ivory domes. So he figured that the skin or the scalp had calcified and pinched off the nerves for blood flow. And that, if you bring that up in any hair loss form, you're going to get laughed right out of there. But I think it fits in with the whole energetic view of pattern hair loss and the hormones that are, it's not a theory, like there are signs of very obvious stress in those with pattern baldness, such as like higher levels of cortisol, higher levels of prolactin, higher levels of estrogen, higher levels of aldosterone. And those things are very confusing out of context. But again, if you take the approach of efficient energy metabolism or glucose and oxygen through the mitochondria to carbon dioxide, the hormones make a lot more sense.
You know, we only have about 2 minutes before we have to go into this break, and I want to go ahead and plug the free book real quick. So how can people get the book? And then we're going to come back and talk more about, because I really feel the blood flow thing, you know, when you look at this from critical thinking, you know, this works with some people and this doesn't. The blood flow thing seems to me to be a real big component of this. So we'll talk about that when we come out of the break. How do people get the free ebook that you've written?
You can go to Amazon.com and buy it for 99 cents, or you can go to DannyRoddy.com and just get it for free.
All right, DannyRoddy.com to get it for free. And obviously the 99 cents is like for a Kindle ebook or something like that. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Amazon doesn't let me make it for free, so I have to put 99 cents.
Is that right?
Yeah.
They're creepy. You know, but that's okay. So go to DannyRoddy.com. Now, I would imagine that you write about this topic at your website as well. Do you blog about it?
Yeah, I have like an email series. So when you put your email in to get the book, you'll get an email series about kind of all the stuff I'm talking to. It's really, it's confusing for somebody coming from like a low carb or paleo background. So I try to create something that would kind of make it easier to get into this whole bioenergetic model of health.
Real fast. So should people have hope that they can regrow their hair?
It's supported in the literature of reversing it, so I don't see why not.
Did you regrow your hair?
You have to understand, I was worried about my hair loss at the age of 19, so I was really proactive. I tell people I investigate hair loss, and they think I'm insane. But I mean, I think. But
you do have your hair now again, right?
Oh yeah, no, I don't think anybody.
Okay, so that's substantial. That's substantial. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll pick it up on the other side with Danny Roddy. Stay tuned.
Look, if you had one shot, one opportunity.
Welcome back. If you had one shot, one opportunity to get your hair back, what would you do? Would you ignore it? No. I've developed a terrible receding hairline. I hate it. I have to tell you the truth. I've just chalked it up to being, you know, like I'm 56 years old and this is the way it is. But deep in the recesses of my mind, I always think to myself, if I had the time, which I really don't, I have some modalities that I would pursue because I believe, from what I understand of how the follicle works, that the follicle is in the dormant phase, and I could wake it back up and make it grow again. But, okay, so real quick, I want to mention something. To those of you who are even out there thinking, well, I would try finasteride if it'll help me regrow hair, let me give you a tip of something that will be less damaging, have less long-term effects, and you can use it in the area that you want to instead of delivering it to your entire body, and that's progesterone cream. If you look at the molecule of finasteride and you look at the molecule of progesterone, you will discover what Merck discovered, that this is a synthetic form of progesterone but has some nasty side effects. Progesterone reduces 5-alpha reductase on its own. It's magic. Get a good progesterone cream on the internet and rub it into your scalp at night before you go to sleep. Not too much because you don't want to have systemic delivery. You just want local delivery, a little pea-size amount rubbed into the scalp every night, but you got to do it for about 3 months because here's the thing. Once the follicle goes into the dormant phase, it could take up to 3 months for it to wake back up. So you have to remove the insult for a minimum of 3 months before you see it go back into, I think, what they call the anagen phase, which is the growth phase. So try progesterone before you try finasteride. Weigh in on that. Was that a stupid suggestion?
No, I think that's totally reasonable. The only suggestion I would make is, one, a lot of the progesterone creams are filled with some nasty excipients. So the one I found that works pretty well is Progest E, and it's reasonably priced. But the one thing I would say is I think balding is like a systemic issue, similar kind of to osteoporosis.
Uh-huh.
So I think while those topical things definitely could help, I think there are a lot of issues kind of internally the person would have to navigate through and engage in self-diagnostics, and maybe if they were really motivated, get some lab tests and things like that. And it can make things a lot less confusing, and you can avoid kind of a lot of the guesswork.
Okay, so let's talk about the whole blood flow thing for a second. If you had to pick one thing that plays into this whole bioenergetic research that you've done, would you say that blood flow could potentially be causative and not corollary? Where do you fall on that one?
I guess when I started writing the book, I was looking at the hair follicle as kind of this collection of cells that was really energy hungry. And when I discovered that like the balding person was kind of in an energy crisis, and they were converting more glucose to lactic acid, causing an increase in estrogen, increase in cortisol, and increase on all these adaptive hormones, I think kind of the first step is supporting thyroid function, which will cause cells to produce energy efficiently again. Thyroid is often called the hormone of respiration, and all your tissues can't function normally if you don't have proper thyroid function.
But wait, I want to say something else. But remember, the thyroid hormone is a mitochondrial uncoupler, which means that, yes, it absolutely affects respiration, but high levels affect it negatively. The mitochondria must work harder and produce more heat and throw off more oxidative stress. So you could be hypo or hyper and have an effect on your hair follicle. Would you agree with that statement?
There are two different views to it. In a paper that really clarifies what you just said is called Uncoupled and Surviving, and it addresses the increased ROS and things like that. But it goes back to Raymond Pearl's rate of living theory versus this idea that you should run the system as fast as you can, similar to youth. And it's viewing the body as like an irreparable car that's going to become rigid when you're older versus a state of kind of youthfulness that you can maintain by supporting energy metabolism. So there are two completely different theories of aging, and a lot of research kind of pings back to Raymond Pearl's theory that you're going to wear out, and your heart better not beat so many times because you only have so many beats.
Donald Trump believes that, and that's how he substantiates not exercising, by the way.
So I think in this whole energetic model, and this goes back to the work of Albert Szent-Györgyi, Ray Peat, of course, talks about it a lot, and Otto Warburg, but they all thought that you could characterize life and youthfulness as like a high energy metabolism, uncoupling of the mitochondria and things like that, while aging and stress are lower energy metabolism, converting glucose into lactic acid, and relying on all these adaptive stress hormones because energy metabolism is not efficient enough to meet energy demands.
So what about the cortisol relationship? Obviously, you were under stress, and you started to lose your hair. Obviously, cortisol is high. Cortisol has a variety of effects, downstream effects, which include small blood vessels being shut down because the body wants to pool blood in organs and systems that are responsible for the fight or flight response. How does cortisol work into all this?
I think it's just one of the hormones responsible for baldness. I think chronically relying on it damages a lot of tissues, causes skin to shrink, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It inhibits the conversion of T4 to T3 in the liver. Just part of the whole cascade, I think, that's playing a higher functioning role in the balding individual. So, I mean, really simple ways of kind of getting a hold of cortisol, making sure you're eating enough carbohydrate, eating enough salt. Some people take a thyroid supplement, but you might want to get lab tests or perform self-diagnostics, things like that, before you do anything like that. But you could overtrain, cortisol could increase, but I guess like just kind of measuring your pulse rate and your body temperature, those things are often laughed at like they're some kind of pseudoscience. But I think those things can really help the individual know if they're constantly relying on stress hormones or if the energy and the warmth they're feeling is from thyroid hormone.
Really?
Yeah. So if your temperature was chronically low and your pulse was chronically low, I think that would be indication that things were moving very slowly and that respiratory energy and carbon dioxide were not being produced sufficiently. And the mitochondria is where energy is produced, but it's also where the protective steroid hormones are produced, so like pregnenolone, progesterone, DHEA. So when you're not producing these steroid hormones and you're not producing energy, you're going to compensate with cortisol, aldosterone, parathyroid hormone, prolactin, estrogen, in specific quantities for different people. And it might not be noticeable, but if you're kind of acutely aware of your pulse rate and your temperature, it's kind of easy to figure these things out.
All right, we're going to take our last commercial break. When we come back, I'm going to ask Danny if he has people using his ebook that are having great success. In the meantime, you can get this free ebook. If you know somebody who's losing their hair, if you're losing your hair, you're concerned that it may be something familial, you can go to his website, DannyRoddy, RODDY.com. That is right, Danny? DannyRoddy.com.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, and get the book for free. If you insist on spending a buck, you can go to Amazon.com and download it. If I have a Kindle or a reader, can I use the version that I download from your website the same as I could the one that's downloaded at Amazon?
It's a PDF, so you can do whatever you want with it.
Excellent. So you can go there. This is really quite altruistic of him to deliver this information that he's developed over. How long have you been working on this now?
Almost 10 years. Can I just mention why I did
Please.
that? I felt like the second to the weight loss community, people that are balding are taken advantage of so often, and I in order to try to get these things taken more seriously, I was just like, I knew I had to release the book for free. So the more people kind of experimenting with the ideas, hopefully the more progress people will make, and et cetera, et cetera.
Very, very noble, very altruistic. Go to DannyRoddy, RODDY.com, and download the book. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. I nominate Danny Roddy as the patron saint of male pattern baldness. I am actually feverishly writing right now. I'm writing the Pope in Vatican City right now, asking for this to happen immediately. Okay, so the book has been out there how long, the ebook?
I released it in December of 2013.
Okay, so are you getting any responses, any reviews? Are people saying, I tried? And obviously there's your approach to this is, look, it's not one thing. It's several things, and you've got to figure this out for yourself. Correct?
Yeah, I'm really strongly against kind of authoritarianism. So I think the only way to figure things out is if you experiment with yourself and you try to collect as much data as possible. So kind of like arbitrarily just jumping on some diet or something like that, I think that's a really poor way of trying to fix any health problem.
And you know, I'm a product of the 70s, and I'm all about self-experimentation.
Totally.
I did a lot of drugs when I was a kid. But anyway, so what is the response? Are you getting response from people? Are they going, wow, it's starting to work, it isn't working, give me something else?
Yeah, no, I get emails all the time. Seldom photos, but I've gotten photos from a couple different people. They're somewhere on my website. I think I can try to make them more visible. One gentleman, he started eating like a heroic amount of carbohydrates, and he was the most amazing progress I had ever seen. But I mean, it's similar to releasing the book for free. There were certain times where I was trying to collect as much data from people who were balding as possible, and there were just such obvious trends in their labs. And if you use a little tighter ranges for stress, aging, and kind of taking in energy metabolism into the whole picture of what is going on in people's labs, it's a very obvious trend emerges, like higher levels of cholesterol, higher levels of TSH, higher levels of prolactin, and things that all might not be significant to a normal MD who just wants to get you out of his office. But I think when you're kind of combating a problem like baldness, you have to take into things into account that some ordinary physician might not even care about.
So kind of the Reader's Digest version, if I'm understanding you, is this. From an evolutionary perspective, if our environment is hostile to us, for instance, we are not getting proper amounts of nutrition, we know that can actually reduce the ability to reproduce, makes people infertile. You know, if your body thinks it's starving, it thinks the environment is hostile. If it thinks the environment's hostile, a lot of processes kind of take a back seat to survival. Are you saying that if you're not doing the things nutritionally, for instance, that send the signal to your body that the environment is robust and thriving and you have nothing to fear, that yet another effect like reproduction shutting down is hair loss?
Yeah, I think so. I think you just interject the rate of metabolism into there. So over a lifetime, you accumulate stresses, and it signals kind of this false adaptation for your thyroid to go lower. And to meet energy needs, I think the person increases or a higher functioning of their adaptive stress hormones. A guy named Hans Selye kind of intimately laid out all the details of this. But I think it's just a slow, chronic reliance on these adaptive stress mechanisms that further suppress energy metabolism, that causes changes in the scalp. The first thing that the body doesn't care about is the growth of hair, and I think that's kind of how it works. All the details, I think, have yet to be elucidated, but I think this is kind of good starting point. And there are some really obvious things I think you can do that are really simple, and they don't take buying anything from me to do, and you can measure them and test them at home.
What about a guy like me who I recently started on Armour Thyroid because I'm at that age now where I feel like my thyroid isn't functioning as good as it can?
Yeah, I think like a thyroid supplement is fantastic, and I think there's nutrition that supports thyroid function, but it's not like obvious, and it's actually really controversial in today's age. So, for instance, like I think the evidence supports that polyunsaturated fats, which are like the current darling of the nutrition industry, are really thyroid suppressive. So things like even like fish oil. And so we could talk an hour about that, but things like that, I think they increase estrogen, but estrogen is usually thought of as the female hormone, not a stress hormone. So it takes like a rewiring of the brain to kind of all these different things that are thought about in like a different way to kind of turn them on their head so they make sense in the context of this bioenergetic view of baldness. And I know it's asking a lot, but I mean, baldness research has been so stagnant over the last couple of decades that it's like, I think it's really time for people to kind of evaluate the evidence and see if there's anything to it.
How long should one give to see if what they're doing is starting to work? Isn't 3 months I seem to remember that for waking a hair follicle up, it can take 3 months. Am I right about that, or am I off on that?
I don't know exactly how long it would take, but I mean, changes in temperature and pulse can happen within a couple hours. So, for instance, if you eat a meal and your pulse goes down and you feel really cold after, or you've been intermittently fasting for the last 16 hours. Like, I think those are signs of really obvious reliance on stress hormones. So, again, it all goes back to the context of energy metabolism and like warm hands, warm feet, higher pulse rate. And people freak out when they hear high pulse, but, and it can be kind of confusing because adrenaline can increase your pulse rate, but also thyroid can, but you feel really good when your thyroid is increasing your pulse versus adrenaline. But people will eat a meal of protein, carbohydrate, like, and saturated fats, and their pulse and temperature will go up and they'll feel great, but sometimes they may need a thyroid supplement, they may need more calcium, and all these little tricks to kind of supporting energy metabolism and lowering the stress hormones, which are just a chronic problem, I think, in baldness.
Do you think intermittent fasting is a mistake from a bioenergetic / hair regrowing angle?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't recommend anybody with baldness try to go on some kind of fast, because immediately when the liver glycogen runs out, which who knows how much you're storing anyways, you're immediately going to start catabolizing the thymus gland, but also your muscles. And I know there's like a million arguments to this, but it gets intertwined with the bodybuilding community, and my main focus is just hair loss.
Regrowth. So. Yeah, no, I know. Wait, we only have a couple minutes. So you just said something about the thymus. You know, I read a paper recently about a favorite peptide of mine, thymosin beta-4, which seems to be a real miracle in reducing fibrotic buildup in the kidneys and necrotic tissue in the brain and heart as a result of ischemia. Also seems to be able to reverse the hardening of the crystalline lens in the eye, and I'm wondering if it has some profound benefits with hair.
Interesting. I know this is the first I've heard of that. That sounds great.
Okay. Last question before we have to end the show. What about this tripeptide? What is it? It has 3 letters. It's a copper peptide. You know what I'm talking about? CPU. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, vaguely. I know people use copper peptides with topicals, but copper internally is maybe even more interesting. There's a really crucial respiratory enzyme in the electron transport chain called cytochrome C oxidase, and anybody can go look up mitochondrial respiration on YouTube and view this. But this enzyme is copper dependent, so it basically means if you want to be supporting energy metabolism driven by the thyroid gland and producing carbon dioxide, that you need to consume enough copper. So that suggests like shellfish, like oysters, and things are really great for people with hair loss. And I've heard lots of anecdotes about that, like reversing gray hair and such.
There's a tripeptide that I actually have in my freezer that's supposed to regrow hair. It's very, very new, and it's got 3 letters. It's an acronym, and I actually am trying to find. There's a French scientist who's written a couple papers on it. We're trying to get him on the show, but I think the language barrier is the problem. But anyway, listen. Go to Danny Roddy, DANNYRODDY.com. Get the free ebook. Danny, great contribution you're making here in your research, and I hope you continue on with it.
Thank you so much for having me on, Carl. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Also want to thank Brooks Kubik for being on during the first hour. Go to Brooks Kubik, BROOKSKUBIK.com. Check out his blog, his books, and so on. You've been listening to Superhuman Radio, and I appreciate the fact that you listen to this show seriously. Tomorrow is Thursday. We will have an episode of the Trans-Evolutionary Fitness Radio Show tomorrow with my co-host Ken O'Neill. And then, of course, Friday, Casual Friday. Stay tuned. Listen to us daily. We'll see you tomorrow.